She didn't say who it was, but I was pretty sure it was Julian, the guy I'd argued with in the Cedar Tavern. She said she was sorry, but it was over, and she wouldn't see me after she got back, and that was that. Typical Clara. No beating around the bush. Very matter of fact. I wasn't surprised. We'd hardly seen each other in those last weeks. I wasn't even sure I cared that much. I just read the letter and tossed it toward the garbage and left it there. I didn't try to call her. I didn't try to write or argue with her about it or say anything. I told myself that we hadn't gotten along since I'd started the job, that I'd changed and that we weren't compatible anymore, that she wanted a suck-ass and a toady and not someone who stood up to her, and maybe this was partly true. But when I look back on the breakup, I realized that it had an unexpected consequence. Clara was my last link to anything outside EMS. I'd moved to New York because of her. I had a few other friends in the city, but as I got further into the job, I didn't feel like calling them. I really didn't feel like I had anything in common with anyone except the people at the station. They became my real friends. At work, I'd talk to Rutkowski and Verdis and Hatsuru. After work, I'd hang out in the lot with LaFontaine and Marmol and Rivet. Before work, I studied. And that was my whole world. My books and the time on the ambulance and the guys at the station. In a way, it was easier that way. Easier to let those outside connections slip away. To have the EMS world and EMS people be my only interactions. I didn't have to explain anything to them. They understood. And so after that letter from Clara, LaFontaine, Verdis, Marmol, Rivet, and Rutkowski became my only reality. The next week, the chief called me up into his office. As I walked in, he was holding up an envelope. "This came through for you," he said. I took it and opened it. A green bar with gold lining. "The attendance and punctuality bar," the chief said. "You haven't missed a day or been late for more than 6 months. That shows dedication, professionalism, all good signs. They say you're on track to becoming an exceptional medic." I tried not to roll my eyes. "Thanks, Chief," I said. I could see what was going on. They were desperate for medics, and had heard I'd split with my girlfriend and didn't want me taking off. The punctuality bar was bullshit. I'd have been embarrassed to wear it. I put the bar back in the envelope. "Everyone says you're fitting in, doing a good job. The next will be a save bar. Keep up the good work." "Thanks, Chief. Anything else?" "How's Rut doing?" he asked with forced offhandedness. "Good," I said. "Good to hear," he said, with a kind of joviality that was not at all natural to him. He gave me a long look, then after a moment made a brusque gesture. "Go on, get into service." I walked out, tossing the envelope in the garbage. Most people cannot do this job forever. I know I could not do it for more than 7 years. That was my limit, 7 years. But I didn't admit it to myself until the very end. I treated amputations. I birthed stillborn babies. I had to tell a mother her child was no longer living. But taking myself out of service, admitting to myself that I was no longer fit to do the job, that was the hardest thing I ever did. Verdis in an ER bed with his head bandaged, and about 10 people from the neighborhood crowded around him. Old women with ridiculous-looking straw hats, and overly polite, overly articulate men in black suits from his church, and homeless-looking guys in ragged T-shirts, all of them elbowing each other, competing in their commiserating. Rutkowski stood to the side of the bed, out of uniform, saying, "Get him out, will you, Verdis? Jesus, I need a minute." I'd just stepped out of the subway and was taking a shortcut through the ER on the way to the station when I saw Verdis there in one of the beds. Rutkowski saw me walking up and said to me, "Verdis got his head hit somehow. Whatever he did, I'm sure he deserved it." I did, Verdis said, which made the whole crowd burst out in waves of protest. Rutkowski could hardly control himself. "Get him out of here," Rutkowski yelled to the security guard, who started easing the rabble out to the waiting room. As they left, Rutkowski stood over the bed with his arms crossed. "So what happened, Verdis? Out with it." Verdis grinned sheepishly. "You probably didn't know I was EMS. I was out of uniform. It's my fault, really." "Of course it's your fault," Rutkowski said. "I just hope his daughter's okay. Could you find out? She lives in my block." Another group of church ladies with weird hats started pouring into the ER, overwhelming the security guard, wailing theatrically when they saw Verdis's bandaged head, waving handkerchiefs. Verdis was a sort of celebrity at his church. I think he'd helped out about half the people in Harlem in one way or another. "Can you not keep him out?" Rutkowski yelled to the security guard. But the guard went to Verdis's church, and there was no way he could manhandle the old ladies. They all came pouring down the aisle between the ER beds and the nurse's station. Rutkowski looked off in the distance a moment, expressionless, then turned and walked out. I followed him. Rutkowski found Marmol outside the ER at the back of an ambulance and said, "What happened?" And Marmol, who was an affable guy,